Hey guys, I'm gonna run through my Templar build here. I've been using this build for quite a long time now. I just never got around to posting a video. I posted a video a few weeks back. Nothing too special. Other people have posted similar builds, but I'm gonna go run through why this build is so strong, and with the new recent patch with the gem system and everything, what makes it better and how I further improved upon it. The biggest thing to this build is that it pumps out a lot of damage. A lot of damage. And the reason why is, as you know, with the Lightning Templar build, you basically use the War God set, make it so that your Burning Conviction stacks infinitely in your Condemnation. Now, does the remaining damage of your dot to everything around it. Um, why this is so strong is also further improved because of the synergy between the Lightning Tree, making your lightning skills apply the Burning Stack, and then the Burning Stack then explodes for the remaining damage. Now, it does a burn based off 80% of the initial impact, and then that stacks infinitely, and then once you have like a shitload of stacks, it then explodes, dealing like the rest of the damage. This point right here, you only need 1 point to be able to condemn, but you don't need to max this at all because the base damage to condemn is literally pointless, since the primary damage of Burning Conviction is based off the initial hit. Thus, that's why we're going to stack fire damage through magnetic orbs, and then scale it through our mastery of the magnetic supercharged. The other things I use in this build are the all for one set to maximize lightning damage as much as possible, while stacking as many plus to all damage elements on pieces of gear, just to get more rapidly stack up the lightning damage. For masteries, pretty much you go the first line to get the final point divinity, because we're going to be using the ultimate divine intervention. Before I used ascension. The reason why I used ascension was because it gives you that 5% extra uh, cooldown reduction, because you can't change it. But ascension basically halves all base cooldowns. And since the cooldown cap is 90%, after you have 90%, it halves it again, so theoretically it gives you 95% cooldown reduction, which lets you spam faster and get faster stacks of magnetic orbs up quicker. Though the downside to this is that the problems you run into in the 1,000+ tiers, you start getting gimped pretty easily. Shit just kills you before you can lifesteal it, and your life on hit is what's your main form of survivability. But the thing is if I believe life on hit updates every zero point 0.2 seconds, so there's that small. It's either 0.2 or 0.25, one of the two. But basically, you have less than a quarter of a second. If anything can kill you if it bursts you faster within a quarter of a second before you can before you can leech back all your health. So it is very easily. Uh, it, Anything can kill you very easily, especially in the higher tiers. As long as they just need to do enough health to burst you down through in less than a quarter of a second. Otherwise, life on hit would be actually busted, and it would probably be impossible to die outside of one shots. Other than that gem system, the reason what I have for every piece of armor at 10% health, because I believe this is the best stat you can put in, especially when you're pushing higher tiers, because honestly there isn't very many other options. Resistances are like pretty okay if you actually need them, but as a Templar, Templars get base 15% all res as just a character. Um, so it's really easy to cap resistances as a Templar. With 5 items with all res, so like your accessory, your amulet, your ring, your boots, and your chest, these 5 pieces can all get all res, which plus the base, so that alone is 75%, plus the 15% innate Templar is 90% all res. And you just need to pick up an extra like I believe 60. So uh, yeah. And so the 60 I normally pick up is the 20. You get the 20 through secondaries, and then the primary 17, and then you just pick up another. You can pick up to 30, but I only put 3 points because that's just enough to barely cap me. The lowest part is the physical, since you can only get 17 versus secondaries 20. And yeah, so that's enough to just barely cap me on physical. Everything else is slightly overcapped. So it's all fine in there. Another thing is Most of these points you put in, I need to respec my mastery actually because I don't need these points right here. Static overload and uh, these two, electrocution and voltaic, is pretty useless when it comes to the magnetic orb spawns for two reasons. One, magnetic overload and static overload. All these procs heavily bog down FPS pretty damn hard. And only that, but they're actually not that great for the playstyle that I choose. And the reason why is, at first I thought it was really cool because the overload itself deals damage based off of the original hit, which I believe is like somewhere around 70. But these overloads can't proc burn, even though they're lightning damage, and something's wrong with the damage dealt. It doesn't do the original hit. Like it doesn't do nearly as much damage. I think it's slightly bugged. It's not working as intended. The only reason I originally picked it up was for the overload, the vacuum, the fact that the orbs will vacuum enemies. Now the problem with vacuums though is when you vacuum something, it's immune to pulls for like a short duration. I think about a second, maybe 2 seconds. So if they weren't immune, then they'd be just being ripped all over the place, which is understandable from a mechanical point of view. But that really hurts the playstyle of the ability I plan on using, which is Taunt, to force everything to a very small cluster around me. So if something got magnetized or overloaded, vacuumed on itself on an orb, then at the like right before I go to vacuum, then I can't vacuum them, and it keeps them not spread out, but not as clustered as I want to. It's not that big of a deal, to be honest. You can pick this up if you want, but the biggest reason, again, was also to lower the FPS, because the FPS does get really bad when you start getting huge clusters, and there's just so many like damage iterations going out that it just heavily bogs down the PC. So I used to go this path, but I no longer do that. So instead, I just have points to spare, and so I just kind of just threw them wherever because they're kind of useless. I picked up Revert because it basically functions the same thing as Taunt. I don't have enough slots to use it, just a secondary vacuum. Like the cool idea thing, I only play by myself, so I don't know how this works in a party, but it states that it pulls everything around you and allies. So it makes me wonder if you had allies, like such as pets and stuff, if they increase the area. So that could be a cool idea for a future build. Maybe once Avatar gets fixed, might try something out with that. Otherwise, pets are literally completely garbage at the moment. They do less than 1% of your damage because even though it says it's 100% of your own damage, something's not right and they're just scaling not. I don't know what's wrong with them, but pets don't work, especially for Templar. I'm going to put 5 points in here just for 4 points health, 1 point slice, just for mobility's sake. Around quicker, faster. And then, yeah, that's the only important thing here is to get 20 points just to get 1 point to condemn. I just pick a bunch of passives for all the magic damage, form damage, fire skills. Taunt is my primary form of grouping, so that everything's grouped together, and then once one thing dies, it blows up and kills everything. So this build plays very similar to those D3 fans. This is like an old school Cyclone EP monk is basically the play style of this build. Very reminiscent to that. Also, before, like I was saying beforehand, I used to do Ascension to further increase how fast I did stacks and whatnot, but as you get higher, it's not as needed. The damage already is insane with very few lightning orbs, so I forego that to pick up Divine Intervention, which was fixed this patch. I planned on using it before when I released my previous video, but now that this is fixed, I plan on using this because this ability is only on like a 3-second cooldown, even though it says 18. I'll show you. So, also, Templars can't reach max cooldown reduction with the new gem system. You can reach passive cooldown reduction, but I opt to use prayer, to make sure that I'm capped. And once prayer activates, I have 90%, and it lasts about 10.35 seconds. So it's pretty fine. Uptime is easy. Once it's uptime, you'll now notice that Divine Intervention is now 8.5 seconds. So I activate it. It's like, oh, but I also have Alacrity, so I can activate Alacrity, and it's like reset. So the cooldown of all my skills is equal to the cooldown of Alacrity. Because as long as Alacrity, no matter what I cast, instant reset. So everything is basically a 3-second cooldown, which is pretty nice. Outside of that, the cool thing about Divine Intervention is the fact that it bubbles you for 350% of your max health. So this is basically, if I activate this, I get a almost 100,000 shield. I already have a 27,000 shield. So this effectively just massively increases my life pool and allows me to survive extremely high amounts of burst before I have to reapply it. Granted, on my standard rotation, every time I vacuum, I almost immediately always Divine Intervention to make sure that I survive any amounts of burst as much as possible. Alacrity again just gives you passive cooldown reduction, but the main primary use is the reset, so that you're able to double stack your orbs every rotation, which is a 3 seconds. So you just left click, Alacrity, left click, and you're able to get 2 stacks every set of rotation. So this Alacrity doubles basically the rate at which you can stack elemental orbs, which is really strong. Outside of that, with the new gen system, I opted to go reach. Before I was trying out damage and testing a few things like overpower and stuff like that, but I decided to just maximize reach as much as possible. I even I got a new War God's Crown that had effect duration. I dropped it for more reach, just to maximize reach for a few reasons. One, increase how far my taunt pulls everything, and then the orb's damage is that's kind of whatever. The biggest thing was how much things I can taunt and pull together, and then also how big the explosion is on Condemned, so that I can really grab the entire scream, and then after grabbing everything, as long as one thing dies, everything dies. And so it makes for some really fast clears, and I'm very proud and excited for this build. Unfortunately, I did read that Squarebit plans on capping how many lightning orbs you can have, so that's a little unfortunate, but I'll do a few runs here to kind of showcase the build a little bit more further than what I did in my previous video. But all I do is just come through here, and because my magnetic orbs because I don't have magnetic orbs or the overloads, static overload spawning, I can freely taunt and pull everything without the annoyance of them being immune to a pull because of the recent buffer. And it's pretty straightforward. It's almost impossible to die. You have maximum resistance as possible. So you just do a round, and you just kind of go and just start pulling, just kind of pull everything with you, kind of like you would back in Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 old school with Cyclone EP. Just kind of pull things around. And when one thing dies, the whole pack dies. And the reason why the whole pack dies is, I'll explain it easier once I get to the boss, because that way I can visually show what's happening mechanically. But the War God set makes it so I stack the burning. Anytime a lightning damage strikes, it puts a burn, and that burn stacks and stacks infinitely. And once the mob dies, all those stacks basically pop and do all the stack's damage, the entire stack's damage worth to everything around it. So let's say, and the burn damage, mind you, is 80% of the initial hit each second for 8 seconds, 8.6 seconds. So let's say before my effect duration was with the 20% was 10 seconds. So basically, if a single lightning bolt did 1,000 damage, it would then do 80% of that, which would be 800 damage every second for 10 seconds. So the initial bolt would strike for 1,000, and then the dot itself would do a total of 8,000. So if I have a mob, and if it has one stack on it, that means, and he dies, let's say he dies instantly. So if he died instantly from the thing, so he blows up for 8,000 damage, even though the lightning bolt itself only did 1,000 damage. Now, as you can see, a lot of hits are going out. So let's say on a common boss, I get to 100 stacks, or most bosses I usually reach somewhere around 100 to 200 stacks before they die. And it happens super fast, and it might be hard to see depending on the quality of the video, but I'll show it right here. I'll try and hover my mouse over, I'll even turn off numbers real quick. Option. Right, so he's 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 150, and he's dead. Now, with the Ascension build, you build faster stacks because you generally have almost double the amount of magnetic orbs, so it happens a lot quicker. And I wasn't actively keeping up as many stacks as possible, as I'm kind of like discussing as such. So I'm playing it not as its full potential, or at rather full speed. Like if I, you know, just keeping up every 3 seconds, you just basically reset. Add 2 more stacks to your batch. Just keep pulling them. And as you can see, like I pulled him, and then the bat from the bottom had stacks. He got pulled into the group and blew up as soon as it got to me, and it killed everything at this immediately. And that's because that bat probably had close to like maybe 20 to 30 stacks. And so if I hit, as going back before the equation, like I was stating before, if a lightning bolt does 1,000 damage and I hit him, but the dot itself does 8,000 damage, if he has 20 stacks and then blows up, I hit him for 20,000 damage from the initial to apply those stacks, but now he did 8 times that amount, so he did 160,000 damage to everything around him. Granted, it's not actually 160, like, you know, that's if he died instantly, because some of the duration of those burns did go through, but you kind of get the idea of how the explosion damage is so exponentially higher than the initial. And it really just, so like a very big open runes like this, boom, everything dies. This is a really good showcasing room of how, and then everything's gonna pop, boom, and pinata, food pinatas, all this. It's just, it's really fun and lucrative. But I expect this to get nerfed. I expect, with the max caps on Lightning Orb, that would probably be a big nerf to it. But I think the main power isn't necessarily the Lightning Orbs itself, but the power within Burning Conviction, and the War God set is basically where the power comes from. It's a combination of the two. Lightning Orb, or Magnetic Orbs, is one of the highest DPS skills in the game, which makes it really strong because of the fact that it can stack. So lowering this would effectively lower, you know, the overall damage. But another one is the dot. The fact that the dot does roughly like anywhere between 6 to like 8 times the damage value of the initial hit, and then blows up for that amount, just really, really strong. So I'll do a few more here. As you can see, it's like once the explosion goes off, it gets really bad. Because I think the game's processing all those explosions at the same time, and when I'm vacuuming, you know, like up to like 50 to 100 mobs in a compact cluster, it definitely gets really hectic. And I can see how the game is just shitting itself trying to do so many calculations at the same time. So the reason why I believe this build is so good is, like I said before, is the combination of the extremely high DPSing lightning skills on top of the extremely high scaling burn damage, and the way that War God set works. No other set in the Templar build, in my opinion, can compete with this kind of DPS, or clear speed for that matter. Just because of how the synergy between lightning and fire stack. It's just so insane. That was like a really high DPS. The other reason why you want health, 60% health, is because to survive one shots. Like there, you saw me dip below half. I was hovering above half. If I didn't have 60% more health, I would have just died. Because I would not have enough life to survive the quarter-second burst. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. As I said before, static. Some of the things that I guess I'll run through some of the things that I think I would like to see changed, or what I think is not very lucrative for the Templar. Granted, most of what I'm saying is applied to just Templar. as I have little to no knowledge of the other classes. But some of the things that I think is what's really OP about the Templar, the innate 15% is pretty strong. I'll give it that. It makes it really easy to cap reses. But another big thing is I'm not a big fan of the difference between shields and tomes. Shields offer just so much more survivability, while tomes give very little offensive value in comparison. The trade-off to like tomes, the best you can get really is like 20% here on fervor, and the gray shields, like at first it was like a cool idea, but to be honest, so much damage just happens that this doesn't compete against like a block, for example. When shields come with 25% block and damage block, and then you just mastery them, 10 points, get 35 and 35, without any secondaries or anything like that, you could get extra block. You can basically almost get block cap with just a shield and masteries alone, and it's just insane considering the block chance cap is 75 and block rate is 50. Like, a shield and just mastery is 35-35, which is more insane than most things, versus Tome's defensive value of just a chance for a barrier that doesn't really do much. And the other thing is this right here, Forbearance. Like, I only put points in this because there's nothing else, like, nothing else of value to put in. Maybe Exorcism, like, just for 5% chance to stun because the damage is literally negligible. But Forbearance's chance, or to give you reses while it's active, is no point, is because you never build around this due to the fact that if let's say you build to the point where you have 70% resistances, so that while Tome is up, you have 80%. That means while Tome's Grace isn't up, you're taking 50% more damage, which is just than what you would normally take at 80% reses. So it's like while my shield isn't up, I take 50% more damage, which is just bad design overall, in my opinion. You don't want for a primary defensive layer. You don't want it to be reactive. Something like maybe if Forbearance just passively, if you just passively took less damage, so instead of saying you have 10% resistances, if Forbearance just said like while the barrier is active, you take 10% less damage, that would be much more valuable. Just because that means not only does the shield block for a certain amount of health, but you also take less damage, so that it helps the shield survivability. It synergizes really well. I would say that would be a pretty big fix. 15% chance on hit, I still think is pretty low, even with Tome. I can understand why why it should be low for shield because of how defensive shields are. But for Tome, I think it should get a little bit higher chance and should just straight up take less damage, or maybe something like more health regen while it's at. I say that, but the shields, especially in higher anomalies, the shield is almost irrelevant because of how fast things just kill you. Like the shield blocks maybe one attack, and then that's it. Or like, it's just, it's one of my gripes about Tome is it doesn't give enough damage to make up for its defenses, and in almost every way shields are just better. So yeah, that's probably my biggest gripe with Templar. But outside of that, they're pretty fine. I could probably re-optimize my build a little bit more to utilize the mastery. Now that gem systems are out, you could probably play around with resistances and probably optimize for the most part. But basically, I just got 60% health in my armor, because health is extremely valuable. As long as I can't get one shot or bursted in a quarter second, I can usually always lifesteal back. So that's always fine. For weapons, like I said, I went for reach just to maximize explosion radius and taunt range. Makes it for clear speed extremely well. And then for offense, I went fire damage because that's all you really have options for accessory, amulet, and whatnot. So I just went for 15% fire damage. The reason why I went fire is because I used the all for one. I don't know how burns function in the game, so instead of just doing lightning damage, I opted to do fire damage so that it would also do lightning damage, but so that this gives 60% fire damage. So in case that some of these burns are scaled harder off of fire damage, I'm not 100% sure, and I don't really feel, I'm too lazy to take the time to actually test it. But this just makes it so if they're scaled off of fire damage, this just helps my damage a little bit. while also increasing my primary damage. So what I need to fix is I need to mastery take these out because I no longer am using static overload. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's it for my build. Hope you guys like it. It's going to get nerfed, obviously. I think it's too strong. It probably should get nerfed. I'd like to see Soul Avatar buffed. I'd like to more play with that. Revert, I think the range is too low on Revert. I would like it to be higher, closer to Taunt, so that I'd have a secondary option. Since they functionality, they do the exact same thing. The Revert makes them take 20% more damage, and Taunt gives you 20% more damage, which are pretty much identical. But I use Taunt just because of the massive range, 16.3 meters versus 9.3, so almost double the distance on Taunt makes it so I can pull from the entire screen. But yeah, so that's my build. Again, thanks guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and have a great one.